Welcome, Rana. It's so wonderful to have this conversation with you. I'm fully aware of the depth of your experience as a collaborator, as an organizer of collaborations, and I will defer to you to describe yourself and a bit of your own history.
Yes, so I'm a scientist, and in science, it's all about following the questions and being curious, but it's also about talking to others and learning from others and sharing your opinion and being open to critique and to critiquing others, so that you can really get to the heart of a question and to tackle it from every angle possible. To make sure that it's solid proof as much as possible, right? As much as you can. So I think this kind of spirit of reaching out, engaging, talking, which ends up in collaboration, it stems from my scientific profession. And I know that I cannot succeed if I don't collaborate. So it's kind of in the DNA of what I do. But also, speaking of DNA, I think collaboration is also fundamentally how we survived as a species. So it has been selected for through evolution, because when we work together, partnerships and collaborations, we get the best out of everybody and we combine the learning experiences of others. So we have a kind of a collected wisdom that can make us achieve a lot more than 1 + 1. And I think also from myself as a person, I'm a team player. And I think this attitude towards being comfortable being a team player stems from my being comfortable with ambiguity, being comfortable to be vulnerable, willing to open myself up and listen to critique in a humble way, and also to give it with the sincere goal of learning, and not personally, not taking anything personally. And I think those are traits that allow me to collaborate naturally and easily without feeling threatened, as some people may when they open up to a collaboration.
What kinds of maybe cultural and mindset shifts do you think people need to make or should make in order to be more effective in that kind of more collective approach to survival of the species?
That's a great question. I think one of it is being comfortable admitting you don't know. And I think one thing is, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And so you feel even more comfortable saying, I don't know about this. So admitting to failure, admitting to ignorance, and that humbleness is what allows you to be a better collaborator and be open to that give and take in that engagement. The other thing is trust, building trust. I think trust is fundamental to any collaboration, and having that as an underlying theme, and that you are innocent until proven otherwise, or you are trustworthy until proven otherwise, is fundamentally important. And some cultures have it more than others, but the payoff of believing in that is a lot more than not believing in it. But the thing is, it requires to think long term, not to think of short term gains, but long term gains. You invest in something long term, and that's also maybe part of altruism that also evolved as a trait. Although on the surface it doesn't look to be advantageous, but we know that it is, and that's why it stayed. And maybe also yeah, so that's from the culture. I think the trust and that being comfortable with ambiguity and admitting that you don't know. In some cultures, progress is all about competition. And in other cultures, it's not about competition, it's about collaboration. And one thing I've seen in my work, whether in science or in social entrepreneurship or in any discipline or sector, it's when you focus on the collaboration where you succeed more. But when you do competition, it's very individualistic and it doesn't end up helping the community or humanity as a whole. So yes, individuals may progress, but collectively you don't. And in the end, we are as strong as our weakest link.
Yeah, great point. So you've touched on both your values, your attributes, and how they have lent themselves to collaboration and the way that you've collaborated and had benefits and contributed in that way. Maybe you could talk a little bit now about how you've applied those in We Love Reading and in other venues where you've either created these initiatives or you've participated as a collaborator.
Yeah, so at We Love Reading, the whole basis and the philosophy of the program is that each person, each human being is a change maker and therefore has something to give to the world around them. And that's how we all learn from each other, because each person comes from their unique perspective, yet we cannot move forward unless we share the different perspectives to celebrate that diversity and to be able to help each other in solving the challenges we face, because some of them are very common across humanity, while respecting the and celebrating the differences between us. So how do you achieve that balance between unity and diversity? And by the way, this is a recurring theme in biology as well. And the elegance of nature is having that balance where we all have the same DNA, but yet we are so diverse, from bacteria to human beings and everything in between. So for me, how we manifest that at We Love Reading is that We Love Reading is a program that has been boiled down to the basic framework, like an empirical formula that is based on shared universal human values. So these are common across the world: love of children, wanting to do good for your community, and so on. But because it's just bare bones, anybody can contextualize it, change it, adapt it to fit their own context, culturally, language-wise, what is needed and so on. So this kind of flexibility, while being universal at the same time, is what gave We Love Reading its potential to become a social movement and spread and be picked up by anybody around the world. Now, so this is a kind of another way of defining collaboration, right? Respecting differences, yet we have a continuous theme amongst us. Now, the other thing is that in our training itself, we transfer that message by saying everybody who takes the training, not just learn about love of reading and then how to read aloud to kids, but when they want to start the initiative in their neighborhood, we as the people who give the training, we do not explain what are the challenges they may find or what are the solutions for their challenges. We put people together and we tell them, we help them or advise them to talk about their challenges, and then for peer-to-peer advice from each We Love Reading ambassador to advise her peers on how to solve those problems. And so it goes from a small circle of people who know each other in the same neighborhood, so they can start helping each other. So one woman will say, oh, I don't know what to do with my husband if I'm going to start reading aloud. So the other woman tells her, I'll tell you what to do, because she knows, she knows what's happening. To even more extensive circles. So saying I have a refugee from Zaatari camp who's from Syria, who has, and she's talking to another We Love Reading ambassador, Maria, from Argentina. And Maria has a challenge that's very similar to Esma. And so they start talking. So at that level as well. And because they're a peer network of people who are doers in their own community owning the project, they now have the capacity and the ownership and the knowledge and experience to advise each other. So it's about this give and take, this basis of collaboration as the basis of the network of the We Love Reading ambassadors around the world. And it's what gives them their ownership and therefore incentive and motivation to keep on going. So it's sustainable because they are the program, they own it, and they become the experts that we learn from in developing our program every iteration. So every iteration has new stories, new solutions for challenges that were presented and solved by the ambassadors themselves.
Wow, and it's just incredibly inspiring. And if correct me if I'm wrong, but last I heard it, you have 6,000 reading ambassadors in 30 countries. Is that right?
There are now 7,000 in 62 countries.
62 countries.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
not 30, 62. That's just amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So one thing just to extract from what you said that I think is we can say is a principle or a core ingredient of success for this type of collaboration network is you're keeping it simple. You have a very basic core. You're empowering the collaborators themselves to work through the solutions, to share them peer to peer. You're not investing a lot of effort in trying to come up with a bunch of rules or best practices that you push, let's say, top down back on them, but their problem solving is even part of their own learning and self-empowerment. And then the pride in being able to share it with others, I'm sure, is a great motivator as well. So those are some great sort of magic sauce ingredients. I think we would agree on a lot of what makes these networks effective.
But what is also unique about the network of We Love Reading ambassadors and how they work together, collaborate together, is that each one has her or his own pace. So there's no competition. There's no I'm doing more than you. It's more, each one sets their own pace, their own journey. Some may only be reading to themselves and their kids, and some may go to the extreme of not just reading to the neighborhood, but going to another town, setting up their own NGO for We Love Reading in their own country. And that's what happened, for example, in Vietnam and Uganda. So what allowed this to happen is there's no pressure. You do what you feel you're good at, and you are celebrated wherever you are. That kind of environment or ecosystem is so important to encourage people to keep on going and embark on their own journey without feeling any pressure. The second thing is this freedom to quit. Anybody can quit whenever they want. Nobody's putting any pressure. And when you have the freedom to quit, you never quit. so yeah, and this is natural, right? We like to do things because we want to do them, not because we have to do them. So those are two components that have allowed our network to spread, and it also fosters this engagement and feeling the comfort to share, because you're not competing. Nobody's going to take this away and be better than you. So you share more, you partner more, you open up more, because it's this collaborative spirit rather than a competitive spirit. And I think that's core. It's about feeling safe and feeling that you can share, and everybody's acknowledged and respected for who they are. And if your friend or your colleague or your other ambassador wins, you've won too. So that spirit is so important and fundamental.
What about, I know that more recently you've really wanted to, let's say, scale that capacity for the ambassadors to be able to do that peer-to-peer support and troubleshooting and sharing. And you've looked at technologies that might be able to bridge across these different sort of bandwidth levels and languages and so forth. That is a huge challenge. And I don't know, well, you've obviously come up against that, how you're feeling about that now, and what you think might be possible down the road as you kind of work through that.
What we wanted to do in order to really embrace and harness this ecosystem that we've created among the We Love Reading ambassadors is to allow them to talk to each other, not just within the physical vicinity where they live, or within the tools that allow them to contact each other, say WhatsApp, but to really, really make it a network that anybody can contribute to and anybody can be on that network. Hence, the lofty goals create these challenges, such as language barriers, for example. I want Asma to speak in Arabic and Maria to keep speaking in Spanish and to communicate, because also we don't want one to feel that she has to change or to accommodate the other, which would create power dynamics, by the way. So language is one of our challenges. The other one is low bandwidth, right? Because we're talking about not a select few or an elite sector of the community. We want everyone in the community to be able to access this network and to talk to each other. So the bandwidth, instruments, having an internet connection. That's another challenge. And thirdly, savviness in using technology, right? Whether it's the smartphone or any other thing, one has to learn to use the software, use the application. And that is another barrier as well. So those are some of the barriers that we faced. And this has led us on a journey of a different kind of collaboration, a collaboration over a collaboration, in terms of partnering with organizations that already work on similar problems of creating networks of people. So again, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We wanted to see who's out there working on this. And if we put our heads together, because we have similar goals, we can actually enrich each other's experience and enrich each other's expectations, and to actually develop a solution that would not just serve We Love Reading, but would serve other organizations and networks who have similar goals, albeit they may come from different sectors. but if we figure it out, it would help everybody else. So this kind of openness, that rather than I want to hire you to do something for me, or I want to take something from you, it's about let's put our hands together and work on this together. And this kind of attitude, again, towards partnership, collaboration, not competition, actually opened a whole new door of partnerships that I had never imagined to be able to establish if it wasn't a paid kind of partnership. And you know what, again, when you give something for free, people kind of, it's contagious, this open spirit, it's openness, and people start want to, offer the same. And that's how we actually started with a company in South Africa who is helping us now create a platform for our training. But that's only the first step to lead to trying to explore other approaches, doing the groundwork and creating the what are the expectations and what are the qualifications of any application that exists that we want to harness or we want to add to. So that opened a lot of doors in that sense, collaborating with other nonprofits, and people would come up, consultants who would just come up and say, we want to help, we want to offer our opinion. So actually it's a frame shift, it's a paradigm shift on how we do work. And I think this is another way of looking at collaboration at that level.
So much of what you're describing perhaps can't be measured in the traditional way that so-called impact is measured. And I'm just wondering, without mentioning any names, just in the span of conversations that you have with funders who either fund or potentially would fund you, do you find a real challenge in being able to describe a lot of these more intangible, less measurable outcomes, and that some of them may have difficulty in being able to buy into that? So when you're describing, for example, the freedom that the ambassadors have to quit, to work at their own pace, and to not compete, which implies also that they're maybe not sort of pointing at themselves a lot with all the things that they've done that then you can show to the people who would provide the support. How do you navigate that whole landscape for funding? And where does money kind of come into all this in general in terms of keeping it that kind of collaborative, let's say, transactional spirit going?
Wow, that is a very complicated question. So let's unpack. I'll start with the measurement, and then we'll kind of segue into the funders. In terms of measurement, absolutely. This approach and this philosophy of doing things requires us to also have a paradigm shift in how we measure. Because measurement, as we know today, is based on a context and framework of competition and materialism and growth, in the sense that in a business kind of sense. And yes, therefore, what we propose is to change how we measure. So how did we actually do that at We Love Reading? First of all, we developed our model. We tested it on the ground through trial and error until we made sure that it works and at every iteration. But then what we did two things. One, we started gathering the stories and the anecdotes and using those as evidence to show that our program is delivering, okay, on that social change or that social impact. So using stories as our measurement tool. That's number one. And stories show depth, show change in the person themselves. And we compare that and contrast that to just providing numbers. And we point to histories of organizations who can boast a lot of numbers. However, when you go in, you find that the impact is not sustainable. Why? Because all of these are measured, these quantitative measures are only measured within the lifetime of a grant or a project. And then when the grant ends or the project ends, well, nobody's going back to check what happens. And even if they do, usually they find that everything goes back to normal. And so what we say is that because we are local, so when we say we're doing a paradigm shift, it's not changing one part of the system. You're changing everything in the system so that it works. If you just change one, it doesn't fit. You need to change everything. So the first change to enable us to change the measurement tool is to change the approach, which is who develops this program. So this program is developed by local people for themselves, right? I developed We Love Reading for myself, and every We Love Reading ambassador is doing it, developing it to fit her own culture, her own community. So this local rooted ownership and design is fundamentally important. Why? Because as she designs, she already has those measures embedded in her own community. She's not coming in parachuting with a measurement that doesn't make any sense and therefore will not deliver. So that's fundamentally number one, right? The locality of the design of the program and therefore designing of the tools that measure. The second thing is that we have our KPIs, let's say the ones that say how many people trained, how many ambassadors are reading aloud, how many kids attended. We report on those, and that's fine with us, but we don't go into depth, because also as soon as you start burdening the person to deliver on the data, because she's a volunteer, everybody who works with us are volunteers, by the way. These ambassadors are volunteers, and they do their work not because they're paid, but because then you have that's back to that capitalistic, materialistic competition kind of thing, reporting to each other, lack of trust. No, they volunteer and they can quit because they do it because they want to, not because they have to. Therefore, you cannot burden them with measurements of numbers for somebody who they don't even care about, right? What does somebody have to do with me? And instead, the language comes as, can you please share with me what's happening with you? Can you please, we are so excited to know what are you doing in your neighborhood? So she starts thinking of the things that she wants to show herself about what she's doing to the others, not because she wants to prove a point, but because she's so proud and so happy, and she wants others to imitate her, to do what she's doing, so that there will be more good or whatever she's doing to spread around the world. So it's even the jargon, the terminology, the approach that we use when we measure, to us is extremely important. I mean, we saw it when we were working with an organization working on a mobile app to track, look at the word, track progress. Or we asked them to report what they're doing. We said, no, you got to remove those words. No report, no track. It's about sharing, celebrating, and like we are begging them to show us. So terminology is very important. The other point I want to talk about measurement is, but we still want to know, we want to know more. We want to understand the mechanisms behind why this program for us, We Love Reading, works. So what we did is we would partner with international, well-known and local academics who are specialized in the subject we are interested in. For example, psychology of the child, or literacy, or education. And we would give them the opportunity to do a deep dive of really intense research on a subgroup. And then we publish those in peer-reviewed journals with highly sophisticated tools and measurements and all that. And we just do it once. And then that's how we prove the point. And this is better than any monitoring and evaluation report somebody could come up with. But then, so we have the state-of-the-art proof. But then when we roll it out, we say, no, we only take the stories and the anecdotes and the ambassadors sharing with us what they have done. So this is how we have approached the new or novel or creative way of doing measurement while still maintaining our philosophy. And by the way, because of this kind of the way we've approached it in this hardcore deep dive, partnered with this trusting people talking about themselves, we were able to tell our funders that this is how we measure. If you like it, you're welcome. And if you don't, sorry, we cannot promise on the deliverable. Because as soon as you come in with the monitoring and evaluation and the words and the numbers, I cannot promise my ambassadors will be delivering what I can deliver on. And I can say that because I'm very strong. And usually in every case, because the funder would say, they'd back down and say, okay, you do whatever you want, because you have shown your impact. The strength of why our funders actually listen and trust us in the end is because we have confidence in what we do. We believe in it because we developed it from the scratch. It wasn't somebody who gave it to us, and so we're hesitant, we're not sure, you know what I mean? So I think, again, it's that combination of being strong and confident, yet open to listening and to be critiqued. So that healthy balance is what can help anyone, any organization, any program move forward and really have social impact. One other point that we always emphasize with the funders is that a funder, and we're presuming a funder is sincere and really want to make social impact, they want it to be sustainable. They want it to continue beyond the funding so that they don't have to keep on funding, right? They want the problem to go away or to be owned by the people so they don't, and sustained by the people financially and logistically. And the only way to do that is by empowering the people for themselves to become the change makers from the beginning. And I think that mentality is what we try to explain to the funders, that this may seem to be very different, and it's letting go, it's trusting the people, but that's the only way you can achieve that goal of sustainability that we're talking about. And that's why for We Love Reading, yes, a grant comes along to pay for the training, but we count our impact that starts after the project ends. That's where we start counting, because what happens after the training, okay, 20 people attend a training and the project is done. But for us, these 20 people keep on reading aloud to the children years after that project stopped. And you go interview them 5 years later, they're still reading aloud to the kids without being paid and finding their own way of navigating how to get more books and how to keep it going. And to me, that's the impact that a funder is supposedly looking for and is not knowing how to get. And we have been able to get to that part. But it's also shifting on where you measure. You measure after the grant what's happening and make sure that you've instilled the right factors that enable that sustainability to continue beyond the life of the grant.
I think you brought out something very interesting. And in fact, I would tie it to something you said at the beginning of our conversation in terms of mindset, trust, thinking long-term, patience, and really, I'm guessing that you approach your relationship with your funders as collaborators as well. And the relationship that you expect from them and that you have with them is also one of deep trust. And that's, I guess, a very different paradigm shift for the traditional relationship between funders and their grantees.
This trust between funders and those who are doing the work, the lack of comes because you have people coming from one different culture to another usually, right? So I don't know you, I don't trust you, I want to put all these regulations to ensure that everything goes forward as I want. And so that's where, that's the tension, that's the pivotal point. So how do we build that trust, right? That's the fundamental question, because if you build the trust, you've solved a lot of the problems. And that's the core of any collaboration, any partnership. So one thing is about how you communicate. So communication, to remove the power dynamics, put in place those factors that remove the power dynamics. So for example, language is one of them. Right? When you sit with somebody and you don't speak their language, immediately, unconsciously, we have all these unconscious biases that we have. Or when we sit with somebody who doesn't look like us or who dresses differently. So the question then becomes, how do I break those barriers? How do I make people comfortable and more open? And then back to that, being open to vulnerability, being comfortable with ambiguity, dealing with people who don't look like you, and truly, truly listening. Right? Truly, truly listening. And in every instance where this has been set up consciously, taking into account that these are very important points that must be put forefront and not just an afterthought or things we check off a list, that's when those partnerships actually succeeded, whether it's between an international NGO and a local NGO, or a funder who wants to fund somebody local, or even between academia, from a local academic to an international academic doing research, because research is a very touchy thing to trust people. So in all these contexts, communication, engagement, and listening is fundamental.
Okay, Ron, well, on that note, I'll wrap up the interview, and just again, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom.
You're welcome.